Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people from all walks of life. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest was finding that traditional therapy wasn't working for her, but instead of giving up, she found something even better. And she found such a success that she even decided to write a book about it. The author of Untangling, a Memoir of Psychoanalysis, please help me welcome Joan Peters. Joan, how are you today?
I am very happy to be here. Thank you
I
for
am
having me.
happy as well. And, we've been chatting for a couple minutes here, and you just have such a glow about you for the people who are listening versus watching. I hope they go onto YouTube at least for a moment just to see the beauty that is you, because you have this amazingly radiant smile and just this feeling of joy about you. Is that something that you hear a lot?
This is in a certain sense new for me because it's kind of the joy I feel in being fully in my life in a way that I couldn't be. I was too anxious to be before psychoanalysis, which is, of course, what I'm going to talk about a little bit. And um, yeah, I think it's sort of like being released into the world is what it feels like to me. Thank you, thank you. So
Well,
I
the
think
good
that's what you're
news,
seeing.
yeah, and I was going to say the cool thing is that is radiating from you. I
I'm so pleased.
genuinely can feel that. So I already love you. We want the audience to love you and know you as well. So will you share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, certainly. I I'm retired now, but I was a college professor, which was a profession I loved. I loved teaching. I loved my students. The whole thing was just the right choice for me. I grew up in New York City, lived in New York City for most of my life, and then visited this small town in California and thought, oh, people get to live like this. How great. And I was always a passionate hiker, and I live now in the mountains where I can leave my front door and go up into a mountain with my dogs and replenish. That's where I'm me again, with all of the whirling busyness of life gone for a little while. Um, so yeah, that's sort of me. And I did in my life two psychoanalyses. And I know psychoanalysis is very mysterious to most people. I actually did a sort of person in the street where I stopped people and said, do you know what the difference between therapy and psychoanalysis is? And I can tell you, in asking about 25 people, only one had even a clue. Um, some people said, "Oh, maybe it's like a deeper dive," and most people really don't know. Even people who've had therapy, as I had previously as well. So maybe I'll start off by just explaining the difference.
I love that because I too have had therapy, and I'll be honest, I don't think I would do a good job at being able to explain the difference. So we're going to look to the expert, Joan. Take it away and tell us the difference between therapy and psychoanalysis.
Well, I'll give you an example. I went to a therapist when my daughter was a teenager and very difficult and having a hard time, and so was I. And the two of us were uh, just really, I suppose I'd say, enmeshed. And the therapist was great at directing me to do certain things, to respond to her in different ways from the ways I had. And it was very effective. But what happened to me was every time I wanted to start, I would start crying at certain points, and memories would come up about my own mother and my relationship to my mother and what I was like as a teenager. And she did not want to talk about any of that. And I don't mean she was in any way, uh, you know, cold about it, but she just said, let's look at the practical. Let's make your relationship better with your daughter. And it left a longing in me because what it
Mhm.
did was actually bring up a whole lot of feelings that I then had nothing to do with. So that's where psychoanalysis comes in. So when I went into psychoanalysis, was able, I had somebody who would take that deep dive with me back into my own relationship with my mother. And at one point, she said, it was very difficult for me to say no to my daughter, because I was so, I didn't know what, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And I just wanted her to, be okay. So,
Mhm.
and at one point, she and her boyfriend wanted for us to send them to Hawaii to work. By that time, they were 19, 20. Um, for a job that my husband and I knew was very gnarly, maybe had to do with drugs. They didn't
Mhm.
know that. And I couldn't say no. And my psychoanalyst, unlike the therapist, who would have just taught me how to say no,
Mhm.
she said, what would happen? What is your fear if she said no? And now I had worked with her for a long time. This isn't off the top of my head,
Mhm.
but that took me again. I started to cry. And I said, I fear that she wouldn't love me anymore.
Mhm.
Why? And then the probing and the probing. And I realized with her help that I was always afraid my mother wouldn't love me. My mother was not a warm person. She was not a comforting person. She just didn't have that maternal
Mhm.
quality. And I don't think I ever got it. My father had died, and I got it from my brother a little bit, but he was a kid too.
Mhm.
Um, and that was what opened up something profound. And what it was is I was projecting onto my daughter what I had experienced with my mother, as if she was my mother and wouldn't
Mhm.
love me. And my psychoanalyst said, children love their mothers. You're a good mother. Of course she'll get mad at you. She won't talk to you for, 3 days, but she will, continue to love. And I really had to investigate all of that, the
Mhm.
fear, the mother who didn't love me enough. I had to go deep into my own childhood and recognize um, where trauma was. My father died in a very dramatic way. I mean, it doesn't happen to all people, but when you have enough going on, it may feel like the practical change you can make it's not enough.
Mhm.
That in fact that sort of opens up into more questions about why you feel that way, what's going on. Now, I think that most people have some examples of that in their lives where you're doing something that doesn't make sense, or you're responding in some way that seems seems irrational, but you can't get out of it. You can't make it stop. Um, and I think, from what I know in your life, getting yourself out of a domestic abuse situation, you were able to do that without necessarily going back down into what caused it, what brought you to a place in your life where you would tolerate someone hurting you. Um, so, that's what psychoanalysis would do. And maybe you couldn't get at it through your brain, just
Mhm.
thinking about it. So, what psychoanalysis offers is you go through your dreams, you go through um, just free association. So, it's going to come up, the answers are there in your unconscious, but how do you get them out on the table? And for people who are struggling with making changes that need more than just the practical
Mhm.
change. They may really need a deeper dive, a probing that has tools that they use, as I say, free association, dreams, transference is the big one, where you begin to relate to your analyst herself or himself the way you relate to all people unconsciously. And so what they say is that the relationship itself contains your whole emotional history. You
Wow.
will start to project onto your analyst all those things that maybe you were projecting, in my case, onto my daughter.
Mhm.
My areas of vulnerability were with my daughter and my friends. My partner, I think because I had this incredibly loving brother, it gave me a model of security with a
Mhm.
partner. So that wasn't a difficult area for me. But the projections were a friend who didn't call me back quickly. I thought they don't love me anymore. I'm not worthy. I can never make someone want to stay with me or be with me, be my friend forever or whatever. Um, and that took a lot of untangling. And I needed, I think, more than therapy. So it's available. I mean, people can
Mhm.
go and get psychoanalysis even at a clinic. It's available at certain clinics. It's available for prices people, ordinary people, can afford. Um, Sometimes at the institutes where they teach psychoanalysis, the psychoanalysts who are learning, my first psychoanalyst was learning, and she had a
Mhm.
supervisor who helped her. She tape recorded my sessions. So that meant the price was right for me.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so it's available. But what I try and offer in my book, and the reason I wrote it, is because I think there are a lot of psychoanalytic ways of thinking and psychoanalytic tools that
Mhm.
you can use to ask yourself, say, harder questions.
Right.
Like, how did I get myself here? Why don't I know how to? I remember my therapist before I went into psychoanalysis, the therapist I was working with my teenage daughter. At one point, I just threw up my hands and I said, You're 10 years younger than I am. How do you know so much? How are you such a good mother that you know all of these answers and
Mhm.
I don't?" And she said, "I had a terrific mother." And that was a revelation to me.
Mhm.
Oh, I see. That if you have that in your life, or a terrific father or aunt or uncle or whatever it is, you may just automatically have harmony with certain parts of your life
Right.
that you've had that experience with. Um, and to recognize what you didn't have and how that affected you.
Right.
Not to sit around and blame people because that doesn't get you anywhere, but to really say, well, how did that affect me? What am I carrying around with me? What don't I have or can't
Mhm.
I allow myself? Why do I feel unworthy? Um, and that's, I'm wondering in your life if you ever really got to understand more about that, about feeling unworthy.
Yes. So everything that you just talked about is so interesting. And what I really appreciate about it is that we say if you're in an abusive relationship or something like that, that you will repeat that pattern
Right.
until you figure out what in you is bringing those people your way. And it's not to blame the victim, but it's to say there are behaviors and reasons for those behaviors that if you don't identify and address, then you're just going to be with the same monster with a different face, as I would say. And so for me, while I didn't do psychoanalysis, I did dive in and I've done EMDR and things like that, which it sounds like a few little components are
Yeah, yeah,
similar,
definitely.
um, to discover that. So I was sexually abused as a child, and so for me, I began to identify pain with love,
Sure.
and that for somebody to love me, they hurt me. That's how they express it.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the root for me. But if you don't take the time to really dig in and figure that
Mhm.
out, like you said, you can put a band aid on it, but
That's
you'll
right.
never fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the hard part because people don't want to remember. It's too painful.
Right.
And in my case, I had completely I don't know how to even describe it, just put it out of my mind.
Right.
And what it was is not, I mean, it didn't help that my mother was not a warm, loving,
Mhm.
kind of mother. But it was my father dying and disappearing when I was 2, not the death itself, because
Mhm.
death happens.
Right.
It's how it was handled. In my case, my mother came of a generation that believed children didn't understand anything, and you
Mhm.
don't tell them, and that means it didn't affect them. Well, we lived in a tiny apartment, and my father was dying in the bedroom and wasting away, and I was 2, and
Mhm.
he had been my daddy, whose shoulders
Right.
I sat up on,
Mhm.
and nobody explained anything. And I watched him dying, and in my child's imagination. And then, of course, my mother had to go back to work immediately, and
Mhm.
so she kind of disappeared too.
Right.
Um, and this is from the point of view of a small child.
Mhm.
So you have to get into that mind of what you made of it. How did you, like you explained, that you began to, even though you couldn't put words
Mhm.
to it, that you began to blend pain and love in
Right.
your heart. And and it fit when you met it in another,
Mhm.
in a grown-up person. And that's what's so strange, that something feels like it fits, even when you can tell, of course, this is not good.
Right.
Of course,
Right.
this makes no sense. Um, and that's when, you really do have to go back and try and be, let yourself be saturated with
Mhm.
the very feelings that, in my case, I was told I didn't have, and you didn't know anything,
Mhm.
and then we moved away when my mother remarried and never spoke of him again. He did not exist. So I had this kind of haunted feeling all my life.
Right.
This scary, strange, disappearing ghost father. And we really did just, it never happened. Not until I was 8 years old, I discovered a couple of pictures of of him with me in the
Oh my
bottom of my
gosh.
mother's drawer. And you know, that itself, I remember being electrified by these pictures. And so clearly it did matter to me, and I did
Right.
see it, and I did remember him. And children don't forget.
Right.
And however old you were when the abuse started, that person who had abuse in his character, in his
Mhm.
personhood, is probably somebody you knew from the time you were very little.
Mhm.
And his behavior with you, or whoever it was, is is going to be there in your early child consciousness, before you have language, before you can express an opinion about it, before all you can do is make up your own child stories
Right.
about what's going on and how you have to accommodate. I mean, especially if it's a person you need, or
Right.
have to put up with,
Mm-hmm.
you as the child you're helpless. You must accommodate in some way. And that's where your own personhood gets warped as you're trying to deal with a kind of impossible situation, a harmful situation, or a deprived
Mm-hmm.
situation. In my case, it was mostly deprivation, nobody talking to me about what's going on, nobody,
Right.
I'm just this thing happening, and also not being, my mother, she was only 26, and so she took her grief and her bitterness and about what happened, and kind of clammed up,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't get what I might have gotten from a different someone who wasn't as traumatized by what happened, who could really be more there
Mm-hmm.
for the children. Um, but she was very young and had no money. And again, it's not about blame. Um, and generally, people who, let's say, are abusers of any kind, domestic or with children, they went through something. Nobody is born with
Right.
those kinds of need to harm
Mm-hmm.
others. You develop it. You've had your own pain and agony somewhere early in your life. So it's again, it's not about blame. It's about really, really letting yourself feel what it was for you, whatever it was. And that's the only way, in my estimation, and certainly it's the premise of psychoanalysis, that the only way through is really being there and really
Right.
looking at it, before you can move on.
So the craziest connection that I just made with what you talked about is my dad. His father died when he was, I think, around 7, so a little bit older than you, but very similar circumstances in that his mom, you know, didn't say anything. It was well after the funeral before my dad even knew that his dad had died.
Right.
And so he still deals with that trauma because he was
Sure.
never lucky enough to go through the proper treatment to really deal with that. And he holds a lot of blame. And I know one of the things that you said, it's not about blame.
Right.
In a time, in a place, in a circumstance where it is so easy to blame and be angry, what allowed you to not and to really focus on healing and getting through versus blaming along the way?
That's a wonderful question. I think your therapist or analyst, in this case, it can be either, they're helping you, they're there for you, they're giving you the kind of empathic attention and often love, once you get to
Mm-hmm.
know them well enough, that you feel safe enough having what you did not have as a child, that I mean, they're there as witness, as supporter, and they allow you to experience that. Well, their compassion and your own compassion for yourself. Often we hate ourselves for not having handled it better,
Right.
or whatever it is. In my case, my mother was more of don't trust anybody. You don't need anybody else. Um, just rely on yourself kind of lady.
Right.
And that's what she taught me. It was very helpful in many ways, but not in others.
Right.
So I just sort of hated myself for any kind of need I would have if I couldn't go it alone.
Hmm.
Um, and that was very harmful to me. But having compassion for yourself as opposed to hating yourself for not managing these
Right.
difficulties in childhood, these deprivations or harms,
Hmm.
um, that begins a process of then I could be compassionate for my mother, who
Hmm.
I was constantly battling with her,
Hmm.
but about stupid things. Do you have to wear your hair like that? She would say, don't tell me how to wear my hair, like that. Um,
Right.
it was never what was really at the core of it, which was, as I said earlier, my fear that my mother didn't love me.
Hmm.
My fear that she could disappear any minute, like my father. And there's a kind of mixed up piece too, because um, I would have these terrible nightmares of somebody injecting me
Oh my
with
gosh.
um, with some chemical that would make me unable to fight. And my mother had made me a fighter. I'm tough.
Hmm.
Well, then they would start to kill me and I would wake up screaming. And this was a constant nightmare. And I also uncovered, with the help of my psychoanalyst, sending me to interview my family, interviewing all the people I could find. And what I discovered is my mother was giving my father morphine injections because he was in terrible pain from
Hmm.
the cancer that was killing him. And I would watch her prepare these needles and go and give him needles. And in my 2-year-old imagination, I put together that somehow she was killing him
Right.
and, you know, maybe she could kill me or something like that, that there was a danger in her.
Hmm.
And, these things have to be teased out. It takes a long time and they're not easy. And they release so much emotion because when you've kept all of that emotion inside you since you're a little kid, or you screamed and cried about the wrong things,
Hmm.
about your hairdo, or I'm not going to wear that dress, or don't you tell me what to do, or, I mean,
Hmm.
stupid things, because it has to go somewhere, all of that feeling. And until you sort it out and get at what's really going on, you're not going to know yourself. You're not going to know what's really deep down there.
Hmm.
So I do think that your only way out is through. I think I garbled it before, but um, and that it's worth it, because if you haven't resolved these extravagant feelings,
Hmm.
and if you haven't in a way looked at yourself with compassion and the people who might have harmed you, recognizing their harm, never, never just, sweeping it under the carpet. Oh, they were too young or whatever. No, they
Right.
harmed. They were inadequate. They couldn't deal or whatever it is. Um, Unless you go through that, I think you carry around, I know I did. I was an incredibly anxious person.
Hmm.
And that anxiety plus, if somebody triggered it, I could fall into a depression. And there I had this exactly the life I wanted. And yet I still had this anxiety and depression that kept me from fully enjoying it.
Right.
And that's what therapy and analysis, I think, can give you, is is the freedom, the ease to enjoy what is there for you. Um, and I think you can even get more of it by
Hmm.
thinking psychoanalytically. I'm no longer in analysis, but I have to bring that to
Right.
problems that emerge and things that come up all the time. So, yeah.
I have a couple questions for you. You mentioned that your mom had taught you to be very independent.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that was positive,
Yeah.
but also in some ways, extremely negative. So, as you're going through the psychoanalysis and kind of figuring out where things took a wrong turn, how difficult was it, if at all, for you to be able to parse out these are the good characteristics
Yeah.
of learning to be independent, but these are the ones that aren't serving me well? Was
That's
that
right.
challenging to kind of split that up and figure that out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was shut down in
Mm,
terms of anything that made me feel vulnerable or, that wasn't like, I had in college, for example, I was very lonely. I was a very lonely kid. I was very lonely in college. I wasn't skilled at making friends. I didn't know you could join a club or something. I don't know. Well, what you said earlier, I made a certain reality come to me by
right.
not having, why didn't I have these skills? Of course I could observe them and duplicate them, but I
Hmm.
didn't. So I remained very isolated. And in that isolation, I simply fabricated, made a fantasy of I am here to work, and the work is what's going to give me my freedom because I didn't have any money. I knew I had to um, have a secure job,
Right.
and I had to work to make myself good at what I was trying to do. So the fantasy I created is I don't need friends, but
Hmm.
underneath, I was desperate for
Right.
friends. I looked at other people and how girls would go off in a clump and lovers would have their arms around each other. And I thought, how do I get to be them?
Hmm.
And, but I barely allowed myself to bring those needs and wishes to consciousness.
Right.
So I kept from myself the very thing I wanted because this very good idea of yes, I needed to be independent financially. I needed to have a secure job. I needed to find work that fulfilled me. My mother did have work that fulfilled her.
Hmm.
She was a model and she loved that. I didn't like that. That was what she wanted for me. And many of our battles were no, I don't think I'm going in that direction. Not, I don't have that talent. Sorry. I'm going over here. Um, and she was very uncomfortable with my choice because she knew nothing about it. And, I came from very modest people and they were not college educated. And so my choice was very weird to them.
Right.
And I had to really fight for it. Um, but she gave me the stamina and the toughness to fight, even her,
Hmm.
so that I could go for what I wanted and get the support I needed for it professionally. But in my private life, I had I had kind of succumbed to her notion that you don't need anybody. Don't
Hmm.
rely on anybody. My mother had almost no friends. I only knew her as having two close friends.
Wow.
And my mother was so tough. Her best friend killed herself when her husband died. She just couldn't
Mm.
take it. And my mother's response was, I'm so mad at her, I'd like to kill her. I mean, she was like just in a fury rather
Right.
than rather than being brokenhearted.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We didn't have those soft feelings in my family. We just didn't have those. So you can see that I wasn't comfortable. Couldn't allow myself
Mhm.
to grow and develop in warmth and relationship to others. Um,
Right.
and and that took real learning and uncovering and teasing, as you say, teasing out that the independence is useful professionally,
Mm-hmm.
not so much privately. And I was afraid I would become a child, so dependent on, that really I recognized deep inside me. I needed people so much that in my mind, I was pathetic.
Hmm.
So I just turned it all off.
Right.
Well, I had to really come to terms with not having developed and grown in that social way. And I
Hmm.
kind of had to go back down there and look at what was holding me back and and really learn how to be in relationship with people and recognize the limits of those relationships, what you can and can't expect from others.
Right.
Um, and I had to learn it, and it was humbling, you know.
This process was so transformative for your life that you decided to write about it,
Yes.
which is pretty unique. Tell us a little bit about your book and why it was so important to you to write that for others.
Well, I will tell you, it was my analyst's idea. And in fact, my analyst wrote the afterword to my book, which is utterly unique.
Mm-hmm.
That an analyst, I wrote my book about my experience of psychoanalysis with her, and then she wrote her experience of psychoanalyzing me.
I love it.
And it's so revealing about the two roles.
Mm-hmm.
And she suggested it to me because she wanted me to write when I experienced panic and nightmares. And all of my problems really or many of them were at their worst in the middle of the night. I would have nightmares, I would have panic attacks. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and just be shaking with fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote to her and wrote to her in the night when it was happening. And at that point, she said, "Have you ever thought about writing about psychoanalysis?" And as soon as she said it, I mean, I'd been a writer all my life,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of wrote about other subjects. I didn't write about anything as intimate as this. And finally, I did. I started to write, and it felt to me like everything I wanted to be doing. And a lot of it was motivated by my gratitude for how much I learned from this process
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to tell others, first of all, wanting to tell people what it was, because I didn't know. I mean,
Right.
I got roped into it and had no idea what I was getting myself into. And as I said at the beginning, most people have no idea what it is.
Right.
And I wanted to let people know, to pull back the curtain and say, this is what's going on. And yes, there's a lot of very private material there. But I also felt that since I had finally retired, I didn't have to worry about maintaining my privacy for my
Mhm.
students, for my colleagues, that you need a certain professional distance. I didn't need
Right.
that anymore. And so I was in a position where I could use my own experience to illustrate what it is to go through this and what you learn.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be willing to, share what's in your psyche. But one of the most important things you do learn in psychoanalysis is that the darkest, deepest place in your psyche is just human. What is down there is just human needs,
Mm-hmm.
human angers, human feelings. We all have them. And I had to ask myself, what am I hiding? Um, so, it was brave in a certain sense. People don't
Absolutely.
share the kinds of things that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about fears and longings.
Right.
We do not admit to them publicly. And even when you read, for example, these marvelous memoirs of people who have been alcoholics and then they're in rehab, or drug
Mm-hmm.
addicts, and then they talk about the degradation of needing to get drunk every night or needing
Right.
to, shoot heroin or what have you. But they don't talk about what drove them to it to begin.
Right.
What is that
Right.
need? What is that longing? What made you, what does that drink give you? Where did that come from? Just like you had to ask the question, why do I choose that person
Right.
who might hurt me? Why do I choose drugs? Um, and I say that having chosen a drug at one point in my own life.
Hmm.
I mean, I was addicted to marijuana at one point for a couple of years. I mean, and and that was really a period when I went for my first psychoanalysis in my 20s
Hmm.
because I saw the pain that the marijuana tamped down,
Right.
but I didn't know specifically what it was. And I didn't, in a certain way, I didn't want to know. I went to therapy. I thought she would just kind of pat me a little bit
Hmm.
and I would be better. But no, she teased it out.
Hmm.
She helped me to look at exactly the story, which I did not know. We never spoke of my father or his death or what happened in the first 5 years of my life.
Hmm.
Um, and she made me learn all about that and
Wow.
see how it might have affected me and who my mother was. So, I think it's all there to be discovered.
Hmm.
And I my hope is that my book inspires other people to look deeply into themselves and not be
Right.
afraid. And you know something? A lot of people, that is their reaction. A girlfriend, I was most afraid when my friends read the book because I'm writing about what we don't even talk about with our
Right.
friends.
Right.
And she got on the phone. She said to me, I just want to tell you, girl, you gave me the inspiration to be real.
Hmm.
And that was everything to me. That's better than that was I didn't even know that that was what I wanted to hear. That
Right.
she felt somehow liberated um to talk about parts of herself that I always knew were there. You kind of allude to them with your
Right.
friends, but you don't really go into those details.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that it hopefully will make people more comfortable to talk about themselves. And again, like you say, you don't have to tell people where the bodies are. It's the
Hmm.
feelings. It's the,
Right.
you know,
There are a lot of people who are terrified of any type of therapy.
yes.
And I believe it does stem from that fear of really looking inward and
Hmm.
really digging in to
Hmm.
what's hiding. So I'm not saying that your book is to be used instead,
Right.
but is your book something that if we have one of those people who is terrified and isn't ready to sit down with another human being and share, can they read your book and maybe start to at least get comfortable asking themselves those hard questions?
Not only that, but really, I'm portraying in the way, I write sort of like it's a novel.
Hmm.
So it's a story, it's not
Right.
theoretical. Um, and what you're seeing is what the analysts do or what the therapists do to a certain extent.
Hmm.
Um, and what you see is something I guarantee you people who are in pain long for. So they're going to see what is there for them if they go to the right therapist. I mean, you have to
Right.
you have to shop around a little bit to get somebody you really
Um,
feel is going to be understanding of you
right.
and who has the right feel for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I do think that it will encourage people to take that chance and try therapy at least, or even analysis,
Right.
um, because you're there with someone who is giving you essentially what you did not get. And that is healing.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
love what you said as far as trying out or finding the right person, because I constantly say on here, it's okay to date your therapist. And I don't mean
right.
to go out on a date, but it's okay to try out different people
You
until you
bet.
find the right one. I think a lot of people have that one and done mentality. Oh, that
Yes.
person wasn't right, so I'm just not fixable.
Right.
And,
Right.
they just use it as a way to convince themselves
Yeah.
that they don't need it. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
saying that as well.
And I have a strict rule when, I mean, people come to me to talk about therapy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, go to three, no matter
Love that.
what you think, see three people and then choose. Because if you see them in comparisons,
Mm-hmm.
you have to notice this
Right.
one feels better than that one. I like this. I didn't. You begin to be much more conscious of
Mm-hmm.
your choice making. And I also think we all are very vulnerable to the first person you see.
Right.
You're gonna, as you say, either say, "Oh, I'm not fixable because this person didn't reach me,"
Mm-hmm.
um, or, "Well, I have this is what it is, so I have to stay with it."
Right.
When in fact it's so much a matter of chemistry. It's like French friends. It's like you say, it's like the right date,
Mm-hmm.
where somebody's the right one. And even if you're not 100% sure, that's fine too. Try
Right.
somebody out, and if it doesn't feel right as you go forward, stop and go to choice number two, or
I love it.
find somebody else. And that's a lesson my mother taught me too. Comparison shop. That's the only way you'll get the bargain and the right person.
I absolutely love that. So, another type of circumstance where sometimes we have to find the right person, and we're switching gears here, is a tattoo artist. Because there's some that are great and there's some that aren't. And you got to find that person that you vibe with. Now, I have a lot of tattoos and they tell stories and and I love them and I'll probably get more. I know that you don't have any tattoos, but I would love to hear, Joan, what would you get if you were going to get a tattoo?
Well, I actually do know, and I've thought about it.
I
Um,
love it.
my daughter got her first tattoo when she was 16. And she came home and proudly pulled down her jeans. And there on her upper buttock was a heart with my name in it. And on the other buttock was a heart with my mother's name on it. And I was just so thrilled and touched. So I think I
Aw,
would get a heart with my daughter's name on it and another one with my own mother's name on it.
I love that. Now, is there a possibility of this occurring? Like,
No.
okay. I love it because some people are like, you never know. But I appreciate your decisiveness there.
Well, in my deepest imagination, I haven't.
There you
I'm
go.
right there with her.
There you
But
go.
I can't do it.
Well, Joan, where can people find you? So if they want to grab your book, if they want to hike some of those amazing trails that are outside of your door in California, or if they want to try one last time to convince you to get that tattoo, where can they find you?
So, first of all, my book is available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and it's Untangling, um, a memoir of psychoanalysis, big, big title. And my own website, which has a ton of information, is called untanglingjoan.com. And you can reach me through Joan K. Peters. And on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Joan K. Peters, or I think it's Joan Karen Peters. I have lots of hiking photos
Excellent.
and pictures of me and my dogs on top of some boulder. So yeah, that's where you can see more of my life in and you'll see Ojai where I live. So my website has a place where you can also send me an email. And I'd love to hear from anyone who would like to know more about psychoanalysis or has a question or has read my book and wants to talk about something. I'm happy to hear from them and I'll respond.
I love that because it's so nice when you can actually reach and connect with the person. So
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to either run out or just get on your computer or your phone. I have the Amazon app. Surely everybody does. And it's Untangling, a memoir of psychoanalysis by Joan Peters. Joan, you have been absolutely amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time to really explain to the listeners what psychoanalysis is, but more importantly, why it can be really beneficial in their lives. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.